we now proceed to welcome Professor Rupa Chanda from Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. Please all welcome Professor Chanda.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the organizers for giving me this opportunity. So I've been asked to speak about skilled Indian migration to developed countries. And the perspective I'm coming from is more from the trade and economic cooperation side. So if one just starts by looking at the kind of migration from India to the rest of the world and the distribution of that migration, we know that it's quite a large migrant stock that we have. It's increased threefold between 1990 and 2019. So 17.5 million is the estimate from the United Nations. And there are several important destination countries. The Middle East and Gulf, of course, are very important. But then you have the English-speaking OECD countries, UK, US, Canada, Australia, etc. Now, the significance of skilled migration within this is worth noting. For instance, if you take the H-1B visa admissions by early 2000s, 60% of the 100,000 Indian-born people in the US had come through the H-1B program. Mostly were in the IT-related professions. About 500,000 H-1B visas issued between 2004 and 2012 went to Indians. If you look at the main source country for foreign doctors for the OECD countries, it's India. We are second in terms of nurses. In Canada, we are the biggest users of the International Mobility Program and the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. So basically, if you look across various countries, you'll find the significant proportion of Indians in the skilled immigration schemes. Of course, in recent years, there have been a lot of issues regarding this. We have a dispute going on with the United States regarding the hike in visa fees and two of their non-immigrant temporary working visa measures that they have put in and their inconsistency with their WTO obligations. There's also been problems with the United Kingdom because of the removal of the post-study work program, and that led to a decline in the number of students. Again, if we look at educational attainment rates and the kinds of professions, basically the significance of skilled migration comes through very, very clearly. Compared to the local population, if you take the Migration Policy Institute sort of numbers, the proportion of Indians who have bachelor's degrees or master's degrees is much greater than that of the local population. And the preponderance is also there in things like management, professional, and related occupations. So obviously that it's clear that skilled migration is important. And also, if you look at remittances, even though the bulk of our remittances do come from the Gulf countries, but the OECD countries constitute around a third, around 34% of the total remittances into India. Now, coming to the post-COVID or COVID-related challenges, already I would say that it basically aggravates the restrictiveness that was all on the rise in the last few years. So border policies have become more restrictive, and now, especially in the United States, with rising unemployment, the upcoming elections, it's just aggravated matters, and COVID has added, it's like another whammy into this. And if I just quote certain things that have been said in the US media, for instance, the suspension of the immigration scheme, the optional practical training program, which was very useful for international students to stay on 1 year and work in their stream. For STEM professions, they could work up to 3 years. So this was a great way. It's like a post-study work program, basically. And a lot of this is really going to affect students from around the world. And what they've said is the first and most important thing is to turn off the faucet of new immigrant labor. Mission accomplished. So when they suspended the program. So this is the kind of rhetoric that we are hearing. Now, how will this affect India in particular? Well, clearly the suspension of the H-1B program will majorly affect, because Indians are the biggest users of the H-1B scheme. So the cost of getting an H-1B visa will definitely rise for Indian companies. It will lead to some shift towards local hiring. Those who are already sponsored by the employers and are already through the labor certification process but happen to be overseas, whether they'll be able to go or not, it's not clear. There'll be an effect on family immigration. And the long-term consequences, it's possible that in the future, these visas could be restricted to very highly paid skilled foreign workers, and maybe the mid-level and low-cost back office type of services would be screened out. A lot of it will become virtual. So we might see some realignment within the professions in terms of what sort of skill sets are targeted. So probably it'll become much, much more restrictive towards the high-end skills. And with increased remote work, we also expect less dependence on visas, especially the long-term visas like the H-1B. The other thing, which was alluded to by my previous speaker, is the rethink, the kind of focus we are seeing on health workers. Because within all of this, we are finding in the US and the UK, for instance, that there is clearly a preference now being given to certain sectors and occupations, and the health sector is the one that's getting the preference. So in the US, despite all of this that's going on with the ban on H-1Bs, there is an exemption for medical and other essential workers. So health workers and investor program applicants, so again, people who want to invest in the US, these have been exempted from the green card suspension. And it's been recommended that the unused immigrant visas would be used for professional nurses and physicians. Similarly, in the UK also, a parliamentary panel has called on the government to offer British citizenship or permanent residency to all foreign healthcare workers. So it's a fee-free one-year visa extension for all NHS staff and social care workers, regardless of job, role, pay, visa route. And they've also scrapped the immigration health surcharge, which is levied on non-EU doctors, nurses, care workers, etc. So we can see that, again, not only is there a tilt within the professions probably towards more high skill, but also across professions. And clearly because of the pandemic, the healthcare capacity issue is so burning now that all countries which are revamping their immigration schemes will give a clear preference towards the healthcare sector. Now, very briefly, how do we face these protectionist challenges? Are there new opportunities in a post-COVID world? And how can we sort of use other mechanisms? So what's interesting is the other talk that was going on by Shashi Tharoor. I don't know if others were listening to that or not. The question posed to him was, can we use bilateral agreements? Can we use other forums to somehow push the agenda of better managed migration? And this is actually what I wanted to speak on, that possible approaches to keep the high-skilled migration flowing, but in a better managed way. Well, economic engagement through broad or sector-specific bilateral agreements or pacts is probably one thing we have to consider. I know this is not a great time with growing protectionism and trade wars, etc. But still, if we take a still longer term perspective, because of the thrust that is happening on relocation of investments, new geopolitical alliances that are going to be created in a post-COVID world, to a large extent, I think one can use that momentum and try to push forward in the long term more of broad-based economic cooperation and partnership agreements. Now, why do I talk about this? From the Indian perspective, it's important because there is some discussion about a US-India limited trade deal. It will be very difficult to put forward, but still, it is there. There's Brexit, and the UK is looking at new partners, and India is potentially one of them. There's India-EU broad-based trade and investment agreement, and then there are ongoing reviews of other agreements we have with many Asian partners. So therefore, I think there are these alternate forums where mobility is already on the agenda. How we push it in a post-COVID world is what we have to look at. So I have some ideas. Maybe I can come back to this. I think in a US-India trade deal, one of the things to really look at is investment-linked mobility schemes, because US companies are looking for new investment partners. India is looking at shifting and bringing in investment from other countries, especially from China, into India. So can we seize this opportunity and try to negotiate something? Startup visas, innovator visas. So there are some ideas I think we have to think about. In a post-Brexit sort of scenario with the UK, well, the UK has come up with a new points-based system. It has made things more flexible. It's brought in the post-study work visa. There are new categories of visas like for startups and global talent visa. Again, is there an opportunity here for India to tap into or have some sort of fast tracking for limited categories? I think health is one area, again, where bilaterally there is interest. India already has some agreements with the European countries. Again, can we facilitate that movement in a more mutually beneficial manner? In our reviews of other agreements, mobility sector, occupational lists have been created. Again, we need to have more dialogue on those issues. So apart from the agreements, I think the other thing to really tap into is the diaspora. We do have a large skilled diaspora stock in many of these countries, and the soft power of these countries is important. So the pro-business, pro-trade, pro-investment sort of lobbying that some of your skilled diaspora can do, that is something I think we need to leverage. So I'll just leave with these thoughts, and we can take it forward in the discussion on policies and way forward.
Thank you very much, Professor Chanda. I think you leave us with many, many questions. Thank you very much for your insightful presentation.